certainly not all of it, and certainly 200 students is not 600, but 200 students takes away 10 portables or the wing. I mean, that's about what it relieves, the numbers there. There would probably be some other rezoning considerations for the some of that population in another year from the Nolensville area back to Page High School, because we're building Trinity School, and that school is going to be zoned Page Middle and Page High, so it would allow for some other relief in another year to Page High School, which will, by the time the new high school rezoning takes place, if you reasonably follow a rezoning scenario there, it will probably create about 200 seats, 250 seats at Page, which could then be used to help relieve that overcrowding at Ravenwood. But we looked at all of those factors, and yes, it's true that there are about 200 students that, if you look at the students in 9, 10, 11, 12, there are fewer 12th graders than there are 9th graders, and it amounts to about 50 students per grade of those that would be normally considered under your grandfathering policy. That does make a significant difference. Now, yes, some students would be grandfathered, and we don't know how many of those students there would be, but it still makes a significant dent in the overcrowding at Ravenwood. It doesn't solve it for the long term, and there is no solution for the long term except to build a high school. The question is, how long is the long term? And we can provide more, probably a permanent solution for these students. They would could go there and stay there without being rezoned. And we can plan that for 5 years, and Centennial can take that change, and it's not a growing zone, so it would house those students for the foreseeable future. Questions?
Mr. Peach?
On the actual number, I'm finding 187. Does that include allowance for siblings, or are those hard numbers?
Those are hard numbers.
Hard numbers with assuming that 11th graders would stay.
Well, it assumes that under your policy that currently exists, unless you change that, it would be the rising 10th and 11th graders. And so you would be picking up the incoming freshmen and sophomores in the rezoning. So you would have the current freshman class and next is the current 8th grade class.
So the 187 would basically be net change.
Over a 4-year period. Or 3-year period, I'm sorry, not over 3. Because the first year would be 2 grades, and then it would add the next year's 8th grade and the next year's 8th grade. So it would be, you'd pick up till you got 4 grades, so it'd be over a 3-year period.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Can I make a motion at this point, contrary to what the staff is proposing?
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to propose the Ravenwood rezoning up to a year to look at the utilization of space in all the schools in Williamson County.
So we have a motion on the floor from Mr. McLaughlin to postpone the Ravenwood High School rezoning for 1 year. Could you repeat the last part of that, Mr. McLaughlin?
Yeah, to look at the utilization of space at all the schools in Williamson County. If I get a second, I'd like to speak to that.
I'll second that.
Second from Mr. Vaughn.
Can I speak to that? Yeah. I think that as we look at this, you know, the 3 new schools that we have, we have to rezone those to be able to open them and get them ready and under this time frame. This rezoning really doesn't fall into that category. It's not critical at this point, even though the capacity is high, it's not critical at this point not to wait a year to be able to rezone this. I think the solution that we have is a short-term solution. It's basically a spot zoning solution to a problem that is occurring and is going to get worse as the time goes on. But we're pulling, if we look at the number of, you know, and Dr. Heath can tell me if the numbers are right, but they're close to what I had. The numbers that was presented tonight, the 214 students, if you look at the 11th, the upcoming 11th and 12th graders, and then you look at those that fall under policy in regards to those who would be grandfathered in, we're basically reducing now 200 to 96 students. What I feel is totally unfair with that is the fact that we have a feeder pattern. These kids go through Kinrose, they come up through Woodland, and then as they come into high school, you're pulling less than 10%, probably 7 or 8% of the kids, and you're sending them to another school when the other 90+% goes to Ravenwood. You know, it's something that I know that I certainly wouldn't want for my children. You know, the other thing that I look at is the fact that even as kids start high schools, when we open new schools, then we pull sophomores and freshmen upcoming into high school, and that's fine. But to pull kids that are already in high school, out of high school, in those critical years as they're developing those friends and they're going to carry on forever, are very, very difficult to do to students. And we know, as we look at this on the east side, we know that we're not going to get any new schools based on the county commission and what they've told us. By the time we get funding, it's going to be 4 or 5 years before we get a new high school. I don't know what we're going to even do for a middle school as far as Page Middle School, but I think we just basically absolutely have to look, you know, at what are we doing in our schools, the ones that are over capacity, the ones in under capacity, and those are going to be hard decisions to make. But even the growth now, you know, we have 1 year of slow growth compared to look at it. We look at a 5-year growth pattern, but we don't even know what the growth is going to be over this next year. I just feel, you know, that the new high school that's being built, the elementary school that has to have a feeder pattern, which Dr. Heath said tonight would be a middle school that's already over capacity, and a high school being Page High School. All of these things deserve a lot of look at, and I think to rezone a 5% of a feeder pattern or 7 or 8% of a feeder pattern, when in a year we're going to have a lot more facts, we're going to have a lot more information. It gives us a whole year to look at it and really look at it well. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So therefore, that's the reason for my proposal.
Mr. Leve, you had, Mr. Button and I inadvertently hit,
Thank you.
and so I believe you were next.
And I have a question, and perhaps this is a question either for Jason or the chair, but if Mr. McLaughlin's motion were to pass, and if the board wished to take up the subject of the fact that Ravenwood, still in the short term, is going to be overcrowded, would it be preferable to deal with addressing that from whatever fashion by amendment now, or could it be taken up by a subsequent motion once this decision was made? For example, if there were to be a consideration to open zone another school for those who wanted to volunteer to leave, that might alleviate some overcrowding. Is that better made as